The first time I suspected something was wrong, it was because of the silence. Not the comfortable silence that grows between two people who know each other well, but the kind that feels heavy, like a storm waiting to break. My name is Emma Carter, and for 10 years I believed I had the perfect marriage. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of man everyone admired. He was charming without trying, intelligent without arrogance, and successful enough that people naturally gravitated toward him. He worked as a senior project manager at a fast-growing tech firm downtown, while I ran a small interior design business from home. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. Our house was modest but beautiful. White siding, a wraparound porch, and a maple tree in the front yard that turned brilliant shades of red every autumn. It was the kind of house people slowed down to look at when they drove past. And inside that house, I thought our life was perfect. Every morning, Daniel would kiss my forehead before leaving for work. Every evening, we would cook dinner together. Or, at least, we used to, because about 6 months ago, things began to change. At first, it was small. Daniel started working later. Big project, he told me one evening while loosening his tie in the kitchen. The company's pushing hard for the deadline. I nodded, believing him without question. After all, Daniel had always been ambitious. But then the late nights became later. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until midnight. Other nights, he'd say he had to travel for meetings. And slowly, the warmth in our house began to fade. I remember one night in particular. Rain was tapping softly against the windows, and I had made Daniel's favorite dinner, garlic butter salmon with roasted vegetables. The food sat on the table, growing cold. 9 p.m. passed, then 10 o'clock. Finally, at 11:30, I heard the front door open. Daniel walked in smelling faintly of expensive perfume. Not mine. He looked tired but strangely distant, like his mind was somewhere else. "Sorry," he said casually, setting his briefcase down. Meeting ran late. I forced a smile. No problem. But inside my chest, something shifted. A quiet, uneasy feeling. The kind you try to ignore, but can't. Over the next few weeks, the signs became impossible to miss. Daniel guarded his phone, like it contained state secrets. He started going to the gym every evening, something he had never cared about before. And worst of all, he stopped looking at me the way he used to. The man who once couldn't take his eyes off me now barely noticed when I walked into the room. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I had gained weight. Maybe I had become boring. Maybe marriage had simply made us ordinary. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was wrong. One evening, while Daniel was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but that night curiosity won. The screen lit up with a message preview, and the name at the top made my stomach twist. Lily Redheart. The message read, "I miss you already. Tonight was amazing." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. My hands started shaking. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear in my ears. Because in 10 years of marriage, I had never heard Daniel mention anyone named Lily. Slowly, I opened the message thread, and what I saw shattered everything. Hundreds of messages, flirting, private jokes, plans for secret dinners, and photos. Photos of Daniel smiling at a woman I had never seen before. She was young, beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who knew exactly what effect she had on men. Scrolling further, I saw something worse. A message from Daniel. "Emma has no idea. She trusts me completely." The words burned into my mind like fire. For several minutes, I just stood there, frozen. 10 years. 10 years of love, loyalty, and shared memories. And all of it meant nothing to him. The shower turned off upstairs. Panic shot through me. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the counter, exactly where it had been. Then I sat down at the table and stared at the cold dinner in front of me. Daniel walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, drying his hair with a towel. "Hey," he said casually. "Smells good." I looked up at him, at the man I thought I knew, and suddenly I realized something important. If I confronted him now, he would lie. He would deny everything, and he would get better at hiding it. So instead, I smiled. "Long day?" I asked softly. Daniel sighed. "You have no idea. I nodded, but inside my mind, a plan was already forming, because Daniel had made one very big mistake. He thought I trusted him completely, and that meant he had no idea what was coming. Over the next few weeks, I became the perfect wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I pretended nothing had changed. Meanwhile, I watched, I listened, and I gathered evidence. Every late-night message, every hotel receipt, every lie. The truth was slowly building into something powerful. And when the time was right, I would make sure everyone knew exactly who Daniel Carter really was. But Daniel wasn't the only one hiding secrets, because while he was busy betraying me, someone else was watching him too, someone much closer than he realized. And when that person finally revealed themselves, our entire lives were about to explode. The strange thing about betrayal is that once you see it, you can never unsee it. After discovering Daniel's messages with Lily, the world around me looked different. The house we had built together suddenly felt like a stage set, every room filled with memories that now carried a bitter edge. But I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next day either. Instead, something colder took its place inside me. Something calm and patient. If Daniel thought I was the naive, trusting wife who would never question him, then I would let him keep believing that, because the more comfortable he felt, the more careless he would become. And careless people make mistakes. Over the next few days, I studied my husband like a stranger. It felt surreal, watching him move around the kitchen in the mornings while sipping coffee, as if nothing in our lives had changed. He kissed my cheek before leaving for work. "See you tonight," he would say with the same easy smile. And every time I smiled back, but inside I was memorizing every detail. His phone habits, his schedule, his excuses. The lies became obvious once I knew where to look. Daniel said he was working late most evenings, but his company's website listed office hours that ended at 6. He claimed he had business dinners twice a week, yet the credit card statement showed expensive restaurants on nights he supposedly ate alone. And Lily, her name appeared everywhere once I started digging. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, I sat at my desk in my home office with my laptop open. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust particles floating lazily in the air. Normally, this room was where I designed beautiful spaces for clients. But that day, I was investigating my own life. I typed Lily's phone number into social media search bars. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and within minutes, I found her, Lily Morgan, 26 years old, marketing consultant. Her Instagram profile was public. Scrolling through her photos felt like watching someone else step into my life. There were pictures of her in trendy cafes, rooftop bars, beach vacations. She had long dark hair and a confident smile that suggested she knew exactly what she wanted from life. And in one photo posted just 3 weeks ago, I saw something that made my chest tighten. A man's arm wrapped casually around her waist. The face wasn't visible, but I recognized the watch on his wrist. It was a silver Rolex I had given Daniel for our anniversary last year. For a moment, my vision blurred. The betrayal was no longer just words on a screen. It was real, physical, documented. But what shocked me even more was how bold they were. Daniel had commented on several of her posts. Nothing obviously romantic, just subtle messages. "Looks amazing. Great shot. Nice place." The kind of comments that seemed harmless to anyone else. But now I understood their meaning. They were signals, hidden in plain sight. I closed my laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I refused to let it control me. Emotion leads to mistakes, and I needed to be smarter than that, because the truth was, exposing Daniel would be easy. I could confront him tonight, show him the messages, demand a divorce, but that wouldn't be enough. He would simply apologize, claim it was a mistake, blame stress, loneliness, anything, and eventually he would move on with his life while I carried the pain. No, if I was going to end this marriage, I was going to make sure the truth followed him everywhere. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. I was cooking pasta in the kitchen when he walked in. "Something smells good," he said. I glanced over my shoulder and smiled. "Just dinner." He loosened his tie and leaned against the counter, watching me. For a brief moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with 10 years ago, and that made everything hurt even more. "Big meeting tomorrow," he said. "Probably another late night." Of course it was. Lily had posted a photo earlier that day at a rooftop restaurant downtown. The caption read, "Can't wait for tomorrow night." I stirred the pasta calmly. "Good luck with the meeting." Daniel nodded, clearly relieved that I didn't question him. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I quietly picked up his phone again. This time, I took screenshots. Hundreds of them. Messages, photos, hotel reservations, everything. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in a wall I was building, a wall Daniel would eventually crash into. But something unexpected happened 2 weeks later. Something that changed my plan entirely. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I had just returned from meeting a client when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I would ignore unknown calls, but something told me to answer. "Hello." There was a brief pause. Then a woman's voice spoke quietly. "Is this Emma Carter?" "Yes, who is this?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strange mixture of nervousness and determination. "My name is Rachel. I think we need to talk about your husband." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated. Then she said something that made my entire body go cold. "I'm Lily's sister." The room seemed to tilt slightly. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Finally, I whispered, "Why are you calling me?" Rachel exhaled slowly. "Because Lily doesn't know your husband is married." Silence filled the line. The words echoed in my mind. "She doesn't know." "You're lying," I said automatically. "I wish I was," Rachel replied. "But I saw your wedding photos online, and I saw Daniel at a family dinner last weekend." She paused. "Lily thinks he's single." A wave of shock rushed through me. All this time, I believed Lily was knowingly involved with a married man. But if Rachel was telling the truth, then Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He had lied to both of us. Rachel continued softly, "I don't like what my sister is doing, but she deserves to know the truth. And honestly, so do you." I sank slowly into a chair. Everything was suddenly more complicated, more dangerous. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Rachel's answer came quietly. "I want to help you expose him." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance as dark clouds gathered over the neighborhood. A storm was coming, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I realized Daniel Carter had made a very serious mistake, because now he wasn't just dealing with one betrayed woman. He was dealing with two, and together, we were about to create a revenge he would never forget. The moment Rachel told me the truth about Lily, everything changed. Until that phone call, I believed Daniel's affair was simple. Painful, humiliating, but predictable. A husband cheating on his wife with a woman who knowingly participated in the deception. But the reality was far uglier. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He had built an entire false life. And Lily, the woman I had imagined as my enemy, was actually another victim. For a long time after Rachel's call ended, I sat in my living room staring at the blank television screen. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound in the house. Outside, rain had started falling again, tapping against the windows in soft, uneven rhythms. Normally, that sound was comforting. That evening, it felt like the soundtrack to a storm building inside my chest. Daniel would be home in an hour, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I didn't know what I was feeling. Anger. Yes. Hurt. Of course. But beneath those emotions was something unexpected, clarity. Because if Rachel was telling the truth, then Daniel had manipulated both of us. He had carefully constructed a story for Lily where he appeared single, successful, and completely available. And at the same time, he came home every night pretending to be a loyal husband. 2 women, 2 lives, one man playing both sides. It was almost impressive in a twisted, disturbing way. I stood and walked to the kitchen window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For 10 years, Daniel had been my partner, the man I trusted more than anyone else in the world. And now I realized I didn't know him at all. That night, When he came home, everything felt different. Daniel walked in shaking water from his jacket. Crazy weather, he said casually. I smiled from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. We sat across from each other at the table, eating quietly. To anyone watching, we looked like a normal married couple sharing an ordinary evening. But inside my mind, I was seeing him differently, studying him, analyzing every expression, every word. How many lies had he told during this exact moment over the past 6 months? How many nights had he looked me in the eyes while hiding another life? Daniel suddenly glanced up. You're quiet tonight. I shrugged lightly. Just tired. He nodded and returned to his food. The ease with which he accepted my explanation made something inside me harden. He didn't question anything, because he believed I trusted him completely. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I called Rachel. It was almost midnight, but she answered immediately. I was wondering if you'd call, she said. Her voice sounded tense. You're sure Lily doesn't know about me? I asked. Rachel sighed. I'm positive. How? Because Lily talks about Daniel constantly. She paused before continuing. She thinks he's a perfect boyfriend. The word stung, even though I already knew the truth. What has he told her about himself? I asked quietly. Rachel's answer was exactly what I expected, and yet hearing it still felt surreal. He told her he moved to Seattle 2 years ago. He said his last relationship ended badly, and he hasn't dated seriously since. Another lie. Daniel and I had celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary 2 years ago. Rachel continued. He also said he travels a lot for work. That explained the fake business trips. And the late nights, she added. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked a question that had been growing in my mind. Do you think Lily would meet me? Rachel hesitated. I don't know. She might panic. Or she might refuse to believe you. I nodded slowly. That was possible. After all, Daniel had been lying to her for months. People don't like discovering their entire reality is fake. But then Rachel said something unexpected. What if we don't tell her immediately? What do you mean? I asked. Her voice grew quieter, thoughtful. I mean, what if we let Daniel expose himself? A slow realization spread through my mind. Rachel continued carefully. Daniel is planning something with Lily this weekend. What kind of something? Dinner with our parents. The words hit me like a sudden electric shock. He's meeting her family? I whispered. Yes. Rachel sounded disgusted. He told Lily he's ready to get serious. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Serious. Meanwhile, he was still sleeping in the same bed as his wife every night. Rachel spoke again. I think you should be there. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. What? At the dinner. That's impossible, I said. Rachel's tone sharpened. No, it's not. She explained the plan slowly. The dinner would take place Saturday evening at a restaurant downtown, a stylish Italian place that Rachel's parents loved. Daniel would be there with Lily, pretending to be the perfect boyfriend. Rachel would be there as Lily's supportive sister. And then, at the perfect moment, I would walk in. The silence on the phone stretched between us as the idea settled in my mind. Public exposure. No hiding. No denying. Daniel's 2 lives colliding in one unforgettable moment. It was bold, risky, and incredibly satisfying. What do you think? Rachel asked. I looked toward the bedroom door, where Daniel slept peacefully. For months he had controlled the narrative, manipulated the truth, played 2 women against each other. But now the story was changing, and he had no idea. I said slowly, it's perfect. Rachel laughed softly. I thought you'd say that. Over the next 3 days, Rachel and I planned everything carefully. She told Lily that Daniel had a surprise plan for the dinner. Meanwhile, I prepared something of my own. I organized every piece of evidence I had collected. Screenshots of messages, photos, hotel receipts, and one more thing, our wedding album. 10 years of memories bound in a thick leather book. Saturday arrived faster than expected. The restaurant Rachel's family had chosen was elegant. Warm lighting, polished wooden floors, and the rich smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. Perfect for a romantic family dinner. Perfect for a life-changing revelation. I arrived early and sat at the bar across the room, hidden from the entrance. From there, I could see everything. At 7:10 p.m., Daniel walked in. He was wearing the dark blue suit I had helped him choose for a company event last year. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who believed he was walking into a bright future. Lily entered moments later. She looked exactly like her photos. Beautiful, elegant, completely unaware of the truth waiting for her. Rachel followed behind them, her eyes scanning the room until they briefly met mine. A silent signal. Everything was ready. The group sat down at a large table near the center of the restaurant. Daniel smiled politely as Lily introduced him to her parents. Watching from across the room, I felt something strange. Not anger, not sadness, just calm, because Daniel Carter had spent months building a perfect illusion, and in a few minutes, that illusion was about to collapse in front of everyone. I stood slowly from my chair, picked up the wedding album, and walked toward their table. Daniel noticed me first. The moment our eyes met, the color drained from his face. Confusion, fear, panic, all of it appeared in seconds. "Emma?" he whispered. Lily turned toward me, her expression puzzled. "Who is—" I placed the wedding album gently on the table. Then I looked directly at her. "My name is Emma Carter," I said calmly, "and I'm Daniel's wife." The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet, because in that single moment, Daniel's entire double life had just exploded. For a moment, no one at the table moved. The restaurant's warm golden lights reflected off the polished wine glasses, the soft hum of conversations around us continuing as if nothing had happened. But at our table, time had stopped. Daniel stared at me like he had just seen a ghost. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Lily looked from him to me, confusion slowly spreading across her face. "I'm sorry, what?" she said. Her voice was calm, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable. I gently slid the wedding album toward her. "My name is Emma Carter," I repeated quietly. "I've been married to Daniel for 10 years. The words settled over the table like falling glass. Lily blinked once, then twice, as if trying to process what she had just heard. Daniel suddenly stood up from his chair, so quickly that it scraped loudly across the wooden floor. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he said in a sharp whisper. I looked up at him. For months he had believed he controlled the truth, but now the control was gone. "I thought I'd join dinner," I said calmly. His panic became obvious. "You need to leave," he hissed. Rachel leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "I think she should stay." Daniel turned toward her in disbelief. "Rachel, this isn't your business." She raised an eyebrow. "Actually, it is." Lily's voice broke through the tension. "Can someone please explain what's going on?" Her eyes were locked on Daniel now, and for the first time that evening, he looked afraid. Real fear, not the annoyance of being caught in a lie. The fear of losing control of the situation. Daniel forced a laugh that sounded painfully unnatural. "This is the misunderstanding," he said. He looked at Lily. "Emma is just your wife." I finished. The silence at the table became heavier. Slowly, Lily opened the wedding album. The first page showed a large photograph of Daniel and me standing at the altar, smiling at each other under soft white lights. The date was printed clearly beneath it. 10 years ago. Lily's fingers froze on the page. "No," she whispered. She looked up at Daniel. "Tell me this is fake." Daniel's face had turned pale. "It's not what it looks like," he said quickly. Rachel laughed softly. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like." Lily flipped through more pages. Photos from our honeymoon, anniversaries, family holidays, 10 years of proof. And with every page, the truth became more impossible to deny. Her expression changed slowly. Confusion turned into realization. Realization turned into anger. She slammed the album shut. "You told me you were single," she said quietly. Daniel rubbed his forehead nervously. "I was going to explain." "When?" Lily snapped. "After you met my parents?" Her father, who had been silently observing the entire situation, finally spoke. "You're married?" he asked Daniel coldly. Daniel opened his mouth again, but there was nothing left to say. The evidence was sitting right in front of them. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Emma also brought something else, she said. I calmly placed my phone on the table. The screen lit up with screenshots, messages between Daniel and Lily. Hundreds of them, including the ones where Daniel promised her a future. Lily stared at the screen. Her breathing became heavier. You said you loved me, she said. Daniel looked desperate now. I do. The sound of a sharp slap echoed through the restaurant. Several nearby diners turned their heads. Lily stood there, her hand still raised. You lied to me, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Then she pointed toward me. You lied to your wife. Daniel's composure completely collapsed. Both of you need to calm down, he said defensively. That was the wrong thing to say. Rachel laughed loudly. Oh, wow. You're still trying to control this. Lily's mother shook her head slowly. I can't believe this, she said quietly. Her father stood up. I think we're done here. Daniel looked around the table desperately, realizing that the situation was slipping further out of his control with every second. Then he turned toward me. This could have been handled privately, he said through clenched teeth. Finally, I felt the anger inside me rise to the surface. Privately? I repeated. For 6 months you've been lying to both of us. I leaned forward slightly. You didn't think that deserved a public conversation? Daniel had no answer. For the first time since I met him, he looked small, weak, exposed. Lily grabbed her purse and stood up. I'm leaving. She turned toward me briefly. I'm sorry, she said quietly. You didn't deserve this. I nodded. Neither did you. Then she walked away from the table without looking back. Her parents followed. Rachel remained seated for a moment longer, staring directly at Daniel. You really thought you could keep this going forever? She asked. Daniel said nothing. Finally, she stood as well. You deserve everything that's about to happen, she added. And then she walked away too. Daniel and I were left alone at the table. For the first time in 10 years of marriage, there were no lies left between us. He sat down slowly. You've destroyed everything, he muttered. I looked at him calmly. No, I said, you did that. The restaurant noise returned gradually around us, people whispering quietly about the dramatic scene they had just witnessed. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. What do you want now? He asked bitterly. I picked up the wedding album. I want a divorce. The word hung between us. Daniel looked stunned. You're serious? Yes. He stared at the table for several seconds. Then he laughed bitterly. All of this just for revenge? I shook my head slowly. No. I stood up. This was a revenge. I looked directly into his eyes one last time. This was the truth. And with that, I walked out of the restaurant. But Daniel Carter still didn't understand something very important. That night had only been the beginning, because the next morning, the consequences of his lies were about to spread far beyond that restaurant, to his job, to his friends, to everyone who believed he was the perfect man. And by the time it was over, Daniel would realize that some betrayals cost far more than a marriage. The morning after the restaurant confrontation felt strangely quiet. For the first time in months, I woke up without the heavy weight of suspicion pressing against my chest. Sunlight filtered softly through the bedroom curtains, illuminating the familiar space that had once felt like a prison of secrets. But something had changed. The truth was finally out, and Daniel could no longer hide behind lies. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long moment, listening to the silence of the house. Daniel hadn't come home that night. Not that I expected him to. After what had happened in that restaurant, he probably knew there was nothing left to say. Still, seeing the empty side of the bed felt strange. 10 years of marriage had ended in one explosive evening, but the consequences of Daniel's choices were only beginning. I walked downstairs into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. The aroma filled the room, warm and comforting. Normally, mornings like this would have been spent planning my work schedule or answering emails from clients. But today was different. Today, I had one final step left, because exposing Daniel at dinner had been satisfying, but it wasn't the whole story. Daniel had spent months lying to everyone around him, His friends believed he was a devoted husband. His colleagues respected him as a reliable professional. His family admired him as a responsible man. All of that was built on deception, and I believe the truth deserved to be seen, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The screen lit up with a folder I had created weeks ago. Inside were dozens of files, screenshots, photos, messages, hotel receipts, proof of every lie Daniel had told. For a moment, I hesitated. Revenge is a powerful emotion, but it can also consume you if you let it. I asked myself one simple question. Was this about hurting Daniel, or about reclaiming my own dignity? The answer came quickly. It was about closure, about refusing to let his betrayal remain hidden while I carried the shame alone. So I began writing an email, not an angry rant, not a dramatic accusation, just the truth. I explained everything clearly. How I discovered the affair, how Daniel had lied to Lily about being single, how he had manipulated both of us for months. At the end of the message, I attached the evidence. Then I sent the email to a small group of people who deserved to know: Daniel's parents, his closest friends, and one more recipient, his company's HR department. After pressing send, I closed the laptop slowly. It was done. There was no turning back now. The rest of the day passed quietly. I went for a long walk to the neighborhood, letting the cool air clear my thoughts. The maple tree in our front yard had started shedding its leaves, scattering bright red shapes across the sidewalk. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected. Relief. That evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Daniel's name. I considered ignoring it, but eventually I answered. His voice sounded exhausted. "You really sent those emails?" "Yes." He exhaled heavily. "My boss called me this afternoon." "I'm sure he did. They're opening an investigation." I wasn't surprised. Daniel worked in corporate management. A scandal involving dishonesty and inappropriate relationships could easily damage his reputation. "You didn't have to do this," he said bitterly. I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't have to cheat." Silence filled the line. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "You've ruined my life." I looked around the quiet house, the same house where he had lied to me for months. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined it yourself." I ended the call before he could respond. Over the next few days, the consequences unfolded exactly as expected. Daniel moved into a temporary apartment across town. Several mutual friends reached out to me after hearing the truth. Some were shocked. Others admitted they had noticed strange behavior from Daniel, but never questioned it. His parents called as well. His mother sounded devastated. "I thought we raised him better than this," she said quietly. I didn't know what to tell her. Some mistakes cannot be explained. Meanwhile, Lily sent me a message. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to read it, but curiosity eventually won. Her text was simple. "I'm sorry for everything. I had no idea he was married. I broke up with him immediately after the restaurant. I hope you find happiness again." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a short reply. "None of this was your fault. Take care of yourself." And that was the last time we ever spoke. A few weeks later, the divorce process began. Daniel didn't contest anything. Maybe he knew he had already lost. Or maybe he was simply too exhausted to fight anymore. Either way, the marriage ended quietly. No dramatic courtroom battles. Just paperwork and signatures. 10 years reduced to a legal document. On the day the divorce was finalized, I stood once again in the living room of the house we had shared. Boxes were stacked near the door. I had decided to move to a smaller place closer to the city. A fresh start. Before leaving, I took one last walk through the empty rooms. The kitchen where we used to cook together. The living room where we watched movies on rainy nights. The bedroom where we once dreamed about the future. Memories still lingered in the walls, but they no longer held power over me. Because betrayal changes people. It breaks illusions, but it also reveals strength you didn't know you had. As I locked the front door behind me, I realized something important. My revenge had never really been about destroying Daniel. It had been about reclaiming my voice, about refusing to accept lies as my reality. And in the end, The greatest victory wasn't the moment I exposed him in that restaurant, or the moment his double life collapsed. The greatest victory was something much simpler. I walked away, free, ready to begin a new chapter. And Daniel Carter would spend the rest of his life remembering the moment he lost everything, because he believed two women would never discover the truth. But we did, and the truth was stronger than any lie he ever told.